Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. You know how much you guys love when we really get into a topic, and today we're tackling a big one. The fear of speaking English.
It's something I think we can all relate to on some level, right? Like that feeling of, I don't know, just being afraid to make a mistake.
Especially when it comes to language. I mean, it feels so personal, right? It's like you're putting yourself out there and...
It can be so vulnerable.
So vulnerable. We're working with this dialogue between Ryan, who's a university student, and he is really struggling with this fear of speaking English. And then you have his friend Sophia, who's like this wise, almost like a mentor figure who's offering all this amazing advice. And we're going to break it down and, like he says, see if we can all relate to it on some level.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting is how right away they jump into this feeling of being judged for making mistakes. And like that seems to be like the core fear, right?
Totally. It's like you're so afraid of sounding stupid or saying the wrong thing that it just paralyzes you.
And I think that's what prevents a lot of people from even trying. You know, they're so worried about making a mistake that they just don't speak at all.
But Sophia, she comes in with this great analogy about a baby learning to walk.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Right. Like you wouldn't expect a baby to just get up and start running a marathon on their first try.
No. They're going to fall, they're going to stumble, they're going to make a mess of it.
Exactly. But that's how they learn. And it's the same with language. You have to embrace those mistakes, those stumbles as part of the process.
And the more you do it, the more you practice, the stronger you get. It really is like training a muscle.
And Ryan, he's totally fine with writing in English. But when it comes to speaking, it's like a whole different ball game.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set, right? Writing, you have time to think, to edit, to craft your words. But speaking, it's all happening in real time.
It's like that pressure of having to come up with the right words right on the spot.
And not just the right words, but the right pronunciation, the right grammar, the right intonation.
Yeah.
It's a lot to juggle.
No wonder it feels so overwhelming. So Sophia, she's like, okay, let's break this down. Let's start with something simple.
I love how she encourages him to just talk to himself in English.
Like narrate your day. Just walk around your house and talk about what you're doing.
Exactly. Like I'm making breakfast, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going for a walk. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
The point is to get comfortable with the sounds of the language, to get those words flowing out of your mouth without overthinking it.
And to get over that fear of hearing your own voice speaking English.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. We get so used to hearing ourselves speak in our native language that it can feel really strange and awkward to hear ourselves speaking in English.
But the more you do it, the more normal it becomes, and the more confident you feel.
And Sophia, she emphasizes that it's okay to start with simple vocabulary. Even if you're just stringing together basic words and phrases, that's totally fine.
It's more important to focus on getting your meaning across than on using perfect grammar or complex vocabulary.
It's about expressing yourself, not impressing anyone.
Right. And you know what? A lot of people get hung up on trying to sound like a native speaker.
Yeah.
But the truth is, even native speakers make mistakes.
Oh, totally. Like nobody speaks perfectly all the time.
And accents are beautiful. They're part of what makes language so interesting and diverse.
So embrace your accent. Embrace your mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
And you know what's really cool? Sophia, she actually puts her money where her mouth is and suggests that Ryan find a friend to practice with.
That's so important. Having a supportive language partner can make such a difference.
Someone who you feel comfortable making mistakes in front of. Someone who will encourage you and help you along the way.
And someone who won't judge you for your accent or your grammar.
Exactly. And I think it's important to point out that this doesn't have to be a native English speaker. It could be anyone who's also learning English.
That's a great point, because then you can both support each other and learn from each other's mistakes.
And you know what's really cool? They actually jump right into a practice session in the dialogue.
Oh, yeah. And there's this moment where Ryan, he's trying to say something like, I want bread and eggs.
I remember that.
Yeah.
He gets all tongue-tied and he's like, I want bread and
And Sophia, she just smiles and she's like, eggs? You want bread and eggs? And it's such a small moment, but it's so powerful because it shows how a little encouragement and positive reinforcement can go a long way.
And it also shows that it's okay to stumble and to correct yourself. It's all part of the process.
And as they continue practicing, Sophia throws out another gem. She's like, you know what? You should try watching movies and listening to podcasts in English.
Yeah, that's a great way to get exposed to the language in a more natural setting.
And it's fun. Like, you don't even feel like you're studying.
It's like passive learning. You're just absorbing the language without even realizing it.
And she mentions this technique called shadowing, which I've heard of, but I've never actually tried.
Oh, shadowing is so cool. It's basically where you listen to a native speaker and you try to repeat what they're saying at the same time.
Like you're mimicking them.
Exactly. And it's amazing for improving your pronunciation, your intonation, your fluency. It really helps you to internalize the rhythms and sounds of the language.
That's so interesting. I might have to give that a try.
I highly recommend it. It can feel a little awkward at first, but it's so effective.
So Sophia, she's giving Ryan all this great advice about practicing and immersing himself in the language. But then she takes it a step further and she's like, okay, now you got to go out into the real world and use your English.
That's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Like ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, talking to people in shops.
Those everyday interactions can be so nerve-wracking, but they're also the best way to build your confidence.
And Sophia, she reminds Ryan that most people are kind and patient. They understand that you're learning and they're not expecting you to be perfect.
That's so important to remember. We tend to overestimate how much people are judging us.
And she ends with this really powerful statement. She's like, confidence comes from action.
Mic drop. That's so true, though.
It's not about waiting until you feel confident. It's about taking action even when you're scared and letting that action build your confidence.
It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and realizing that the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
This has been such an insightful deep dive so far. We've covered so much ground already, from practical tips to mindset shifts, and there's still more to come, so stick with us.
I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I'm excited to see what other gems Sophia has in store for us.
Me too. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with more insights on conquering the fear of speaking English. It's amazing how Sophia manages to weave in those practical tips with this deeper message about confidence and action.
It's like she's saying you don't have to wait until you feel confident to start speaking English. Like the action itself will build your confidence.
It's like jumping into the deep end of the pool even though you're afraid of water.
And then realizing, hey, I can actually swim.
Exactly. And the more you swim, the more confident you become.
It's like that zone of proximal development, you know? Pushing yourself just a little bit beyond your comfort zone is where the real growth happens.
Speaking of pushing myself, I actually tried that shadowing technique you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah. How did it go?
It's harder than it sounds, like trying to keep up with the speaker and match their pronunciation and intonation. It's like a workout for your brain.
It is, but it's so effective. You're basically training your mouth and your brain to work together to produce those English sounds.
And it really makes you pay attention to the details. Like, I never realized how much intonation and rhythm play a role in spoken English.
It's like the music of the language.
Exactly. And when you start to get those nuances, it just sounds so much more natural.
And you know what else I love about Sophia's approach? She doesn't dismiss the power of just listening to English. Like watching movies and TV shows, listening to music and podcasts.
It's like you're immersing yourself in the language, even when you're not actively studying.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
Like you're not even realizing that you're learning.
It's like osmosis for your brain.
Exactly. And the more you listen, the more you start to pick up on those patterns and those sounds, and it just becomes more and more familiar.
And then when you do go to speak, it's like those words and phrases are already there in your head, just waiting to come out.
And you know what's cool about movies? You get that visual context too. You see the facial expressions, the body language, the environment, and it all helps to reinforce the meaning of the words.
It's like learning by doing, even if you're not the one speaking.
And it's a great way to pick up on those idiomatic expressions and slang terms that you might not find in a textbook.
Oh, totally. Like all those little nuances that make the language come alive.
And then Sophia, she's like, okay, now you got to go out there and use your English in the real world.
Remember that scene where she practically shoves Ryan out the door to go talk to strangers?
I laughed out loud when I read that part. But it's so true. You have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
And you know what I realized? Those real-world interactions, they don't have to be perfect. Like, you don't have to have a flawless conversation.
As long as you're communicating your message, that's what matters.
And most people are really understanding and patient, especially when they see that you're making an effort.
I think we tend to overestimate how much people are judging us.
Yeah.
Like most people are just happy to help.
And they appreciate that you're trying to learn their language.
It's like a sign of respect.
And you know what Sophia says? Confidence comes from action. It's not about waiting until you feel confident. It's about taking action. and letting that action build your confidence.
And it's not just about speaking English. It's about everything in life. Like
Yeah.
if you want to achieve something, you have to take action, even if you're scared.
It's about facing your fears and realizing that they're not as scary as you thought they were.
And the more you do it, the less scary it becomes.
And you know what's really cool? There's actually science to back this up. Like, studies have shown that taking action, even in the face of fear, can actually change your brain chemistry.
It's like you're rewiring your brain to be more courageous and resilient.
So it's not just a feel-good philosophy. It's actually backed by research.
And it's a reminder that we have the power to change our own brains and our own lives through our actions.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I would say this: don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to sound silly. Embrace those imperfections, because that's where the real learning happens.
And remember, confidence comes from action. So get out there and use your English, even if it's just a few words at a time.
You got this.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep thinking about how Sophia takes this fear and breaks it down into these little steps.
Yeah, it's not like go out and give a speech in English. It's more like, okay, let's start by talking to yourself.
Like building those little blocks of confidence.
Exactly. And then it's finding a friend to practice with.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now try ordering a coffee in English.
And each step builds on the previous one, so you're not just thrown into the deep end.
And I think it's important to highlight that Sophia, she really emphasizes the importance of finding a supportive language partner.
Like someone who will cheer you on even when you make mistakes.
Yeah, someone who's patient and understanding, and who can provide that gentle correction when you need it.
It's like having a coach in your corner.
And you know what's interesting? There's this concept in education called scaffolding, which is basically the idea that learners need support structures in place as they're learning something new.
So a language partner is like a scaffold. They're there to support you and help you reach higher than you could on your own.
And once you've got those basic building blocks in place, then it's time to take it to the next level.
Which is going out into the real world and using your English.
Ordering food, asking for directions, chatting with people.
Those everyday interactions can be so scary, but they're also so rewarding.
Because that's where you really see your progress. Like you're actually using the language to communicate and connect with people.
And you realize that it's not about being perfect. It's about getting your message across.
Now, most people are really understanding. They're not going to judge you for making a mistake.
In fact, they might even appreciate the effort you're making.
It shows that you're interested in their culture and that you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone.
And you know what's funny? I think sometimes we create these imaginary barriers in our heads. Like we think people are judging us more harshly than they actually are.
Yeah. We tend to overestimate how much attention people are paying to our mistakes.
But the truth is, most people are just focused on their own lives.
And they're probably more impressed that you're speaking English at all than they concerned with your grammar.
So let's all just give ourselves a little grace.
And remember that making mistakes is part of the process.
It's how we learn and grow.
And it's what makes us human.
And as we wrap up this episode, I just want to say that Sophia's words have really resonated with me, especially that idea that confidence comes from action.
Yeah. It's such a powerful message.
It's not about waiting until you feel confident. It's about taking action even when you're scared and letting that action build your confidence.
And it's not just about speaking English. It's about everything in life.
If you want to achieve something, you got to go out there and do it.
Even if you're not sure if you can.
Just take that first step and the rest will follow.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Find a supportive community. Find a language partner. Find someone who believes in you.
And keep practicing. Keep learning. Keep growing.
We're all in this together.
And we're all capable of amazing things.
So go out there and make it happen.
Until next time, happy learning.
And keep those English muscles working.